This is Tales of the Twisted, true stories of the strange, weird, bizarre, and eerie. Tonight, we travel back to the Sierra Nevada mountains, back to 1978, back to a disappearance so haunting, so inexplicable, that investigators still struggle to explain even the smallest of details. This is the story of 5 men, friends so inseparable that their parents simply called them the boys. 5 men who went out to watch a basketball game on a Friday night and drove straight into one of the strangest mysteries in American history. This is the chilling tale of the Yuba County Five. They were simple young men with simple joys. Bill Sterling, 29, Jack Hewitt, 24, Ted Weir, 32, Jack Madruga, 30, and Gary Mathias, 25. All lived with intellectual disabilities or psychiatric conditions, and all still lived with their families. But they shared something so powerful, a deep friendship, and an obsession with sports. They played basketball together on a team supported by a local program for people with disabilities. They were excited, motivated, and full of childlike enthusiasm. Their families said the boys lived for moments like these: games, tournaments, weekends spent cheering and laughing. But Gary Mathias was different. In the early 1970s, while stationed in West Germany, Gary spiraled into drug use. It triggered schizophrenia, episodes of paranoia, violent outbursts, and hospitalizations. By 1978, he was stabilized on medication and considered a success story by his doctors. He worked with his stepfather's gardening business. He hung out with his friends. He was doing well. And on the night of February 24th, 1978, he seemed fine. Better than fine. Excited. Because the next morning, the boys had a Special Olympics basketball tournament, their first game in a week-long event where the winning team got an all-expense-paid trip to Los Angeles. Some of them had laid out their uniforms the night before. Some had asked their parents to wake them early. It was one of the biggest weekends of their lives. But first, they wanted to take a short drive north to Chico to watch UC Davis play Chico State in a college game. It was a harmless trip, just 50 miles from home. They piled into Jack Madruga's turquoise and white 1969 Mercury Montego. Light jackets, light spirits, no supplies, nothing to suggest that they planned to be gone long. They weren't prepared for the mountain cold, they weren't prepared for snow, and they just weren't prepared for any of what followed. They left, they cheered, they bought snacks at a store in Chico, annoying a clerk eager to close for the night, and then they vanished. When the boys didn't return home, their parents knew something was wrong. They waited through the night. They called friends. By morning, police were notified. Searchers scoured the highways between Chico and Yuba County, but nothing. Nothing until a Plumas National Forest ranger remembered a car he'd seen on a mountain road, a car that had seemed out of place. A few days later, on February 28th, deputies followed him deep into the forest along Oroville-Quincy Road, almost 70 miles from Chico and far off any logical route back home. There it was, the Mercury Montego. No dents, no mud scrapes, no sign it had been driven carelessly along the rough, remote road. And the snow surrounding it? Barely deep. 5 healthy young men could have pushed it free easily. Inside were candy wrappers, empty drink containers, programs from the basketball game, and a neatly folded map of California. But something was wrong. Madruga's family said he never left his car unlocked. Yet a window was rolled down. The doors were open and the keys were gone. When police hotwired the Montego, the engine started instantly. A quarter tank of gas remained. It should have been able to take them home. Instead, it was abandoned at 4,400 feet of elevation near where the road closed for the winter. But why? Why drive into the mountains at night? Why in freezing weather? Why without warm clothes? Without any logical purpose? No trace of the men was found nearby. A storm rolled in, burying the region in more snow, and the search had to be called off. The car was the first piece of the puzzle, but it would not be the last. As news spread, witnesses came forward. Most sightings were just easily dismissed, except two of them. The first came from a Sacramento man named Joseph Scones. On the very night the boys disappeared, Scones had driven up the same mountain road to check on his cabin. His own car became stuck in the snow, and while trying to free it, he began having a heart attack. He crawled back into his car, alone, in pain, and the temperature dropping fast. Around midnight, he heard voices, saw some headlights, and then saw figures. A car stopped behind him. A group of people gathered outside. One looked like a woman holding a baby. He called out for help. Immediately, the voices stopped. The lights went out. He cried out again. Nothing. Later, he saw flashlights outside. They, too, were extinguished when he called for help. He wasn't sure if the boys were inside that group, and he wasn't sure of much because he was delirious with pain. But he believed the voices came from near where the Montego was later found. Scones eventually walked 8 miles to safety. He had, indeed, suffered a heart attack. But the frozen silence he encountered that night, that detail would haunt investigators forever. Why would a harmless group of young men ignore a stranger begging for help? And if it wasn't them, then who was out there? And where did they go? The second sighting came from a store clerk in Brownsville, about 30 miles from where the car was abandoned. She told police that on March 3rd, the day after the boys vanished, 4 men entered the store in a red pickup truck. She immediately recognized them from the missing persons flyers. She said their wide-eyed, anxious expressions stood out. 2 stayed outside using a telephone booth. 2 went inside to buy food, burritos, chocolate milk, and soft drinks. The store owner corroborated the account. It made no sense, but it felt real. Weyers and Hewitt's families said the behavior described was eerily accurate. Weyer ate almost anything and was rarely without Hewitt. Hewitt hated using phones. So to this day, no one knows if that sighting was real or just a tragic coincidence. But if the boys were alive on March 3rd, why didn't they go home? And where was Gary Mathias? Spring turned to early summer. Snow melted, and with it, the forest gave up its secrets. On June 4th, a group of motorcyclists visited a secluded U.S. Forest Service trailer nearly 20 miles from where the Montego had been found. One window was broken. The door was ajar, and when they opened it, the smell of death washed over them. Inside, lying on a bed, wrapped carefully in 8 sheets, was Ted Weir. He had lost nearly half his body weight. His beard growth suggested he survived up to 3 months after the disappearance. Inside the trailer were his belongings, wallet, ring, necklace, and one strange object. A gold watch missing its crystal. Not one of his family recognized. And Ted had no shoes. But someone else's shoes were there. They were Gary Mathias' shoes. Investigators realized Gary had also made it to the trailer. He had eaten the sea rations stored outside. Only Gary or Madruga, both military veterans, would have known how to open them with a P-38 can opener. Someone had covered Ted's body with sheets, a kindness Ted, with his frost-bitten, gangrenous feet, could never have done himself. Someone was there with him. Someone who left. Someone who vanished. Searchers followed the road between the trailer and the Montego. The next day, they found 2 more bodies, Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling, 11 miles from the car, opposite sides of the road. Madruga had been partially eaten by animals, and Sterling was reduced to just bones. Both supposedly died of hypothermia. Investigators believed one succumbed to the exhaustion of the cold, and the other refused to leave his friend's side. 2 days later, Hewitt's father found his son's backbone under a bush 2 miles from the trailer. The next day, a skull was found downhill, confirmed as Jack Hewitt. Also, hypothermia. The boys had been dying for months in the wilderness, but still no sign of Gary, just his shoes and silence. The trailer should have saved them. Inside was plenty of food, matches, heat, warm forestry clothing, a butane tank for heating, fuel, shelter, but no fire had been lit. The clothing was untouched. The food locker holding a year's worth of supplies was never opened. Ted starved to death with food all around him. The men froze to death with warm clothes a few feet away. Why? Was it fear of breaking in? Fear of arrest? Confusion due to the mental disabilities? Paranoia triggered by Gary's schizophrenia? Or something darker? Someone else in the woods? Someone who chased them? Someone who frightened them into hiding and running and then dying? What about the group Jones saw? The flashlight that vanished when he yelled? The pickup truck? The possible sighting in the store? And the biggest question of all, where is Gary Mathias? 46 years later, not a single trace of him has ever been found. This has been Tales of the Twisted, true stories of the strange, weird, bizarre, and eerie. Follow the show for more dark mysteries, and join us next time as we uncover another true story lurking in the shadows. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, not every disappearance ends with answers.